The film set hummed with controlled chaos. Cables snaking across polished floors, cameras mounted on steel rails catching afternoon light through tall warehouse windows, crew members calling directions in overlapping voices. Los Angeles, 1973. The air tasted metallic with possibility, thick with cigarette smoke and expensive cologne, the kind of atmosphere that gathered around Bruce Lee wherever he worked now. 5 feet 7 inches of concentrated purpose, he stood near a practice mat reviewing choreography notes, dressed in black cotton training pants and a simple fitted shirt that revealed shoulders built from 20 years of obsessive refinement. At 32, he'd become something Hollywood had never seen before. Not just an Asian actor breaking through, but a martial artist who refused to compromise authenticity for entertainment, who insisted every movement on screen reflect real capability, real philosophy, real power controlled with surgical precision. The production was his third major American film, and he'd brought something revolutionary. Fight choreography that looked like actual combat because it was actual combat, slowed and staged for cameras but rooted in genuine technique. No wild haymakers, no theatrical spinning, just economy, timing, angles that exploited human anatomy's vulnerabilities. Around him, the crew prepared for an afternoon sequence. A fight scene that would last 45 seconds on screen but require hundreds of individual shots, dozens of angles, hours of repetition. Bruce watched a camera operator adjust a dolly track, studied how light fell across the practice space, calculated distances and sight lines with the same attention he'd applied to every opponent he'd ever faced. "Mr. Lee, we're ready for the preliminary run-through." The assistant director, a young man with a clipboard and nervous energy, approached cautiously. Everyone on set had learned Bruce didn't tolerate wasted time or half-effort. He demanded precision from himself and expected it from everyone else. Bruce nodded, rolling his shoulders, feeling the familiar pre-work focus settle into his muscles. This was the part he loved. The technical problem-solving, the physical poetry of making violence look effortless while remaining absolutely truthful. He'd spent his entire life preparing for these moments, studying Wing Chun under Yip Man in Hong Kong, adapting and evolving into his own philosophy he called Jeet Kune Do, the way of the intercepting fist. The stunt coordinator was crossing the set now, a thick-built man in his early 40s named Rick Donovan, former college wrestler who'd built a reputation in Hollywood for taking hard falls and selling punches. 6 feet tall, 200 pounds of practical muscle, scarred knuckles, and a twice-broken nose that gave him credibility in fight scenes. He'd worked with everyone, John Wayne's team, the guys who choreographed westerns and war films, traditional American action, where size and force mattered most. But this was different. This was Bruce Lee, and Donovan had been hired specifically to double for the villain in close-quarter combat sequences that required someone who could safely absorb techniques designed to actually hurt people. "All right, let's walk through the sequence." Bruce's voice carried across the set without shouting, that particular quality of controlled projection he'd mastered through years of teaching. He moved onto the practice mat, barefoot now, feeling the canvas texture beneath his feet. Donovan followed, confident, rolling his neck to loosen up. He'd been studying the choreography for days, knew the planned routine, a series of blocks and counters, carefully rehearsed movements that would look spontaneous and dangerous while keeping everyone safe. He understood movie fighting, had the timing down. "The attack comes from here," Bruce demonstrated, moving through the sequence at half speed, showing how the choreography built from initial aggression through escalating exchanges. "You'll throw this combination, I counter here, redirect here, and the finish is this lock that brings you to the ground. Camera catches the expression, the submission. Story beat complete." Donovan nodded, watching, but already anticipating. He'd done variations of this sequence dozens of times with different actors. The key was making the star look good while protecting yourself from actual injury, pulling punches at the last microsecond, falling before real force could transfer, selling pain you weren't actually feeling. "Got it. Pretty standard stuff, just faster than usual." Donovan stepped into position, raising his hands in a fighter's stance, weight distributed, ready to move. Bruce looked at him for a moment, reading the body language, the confident set of shoulders. The way Donovan's stance revealed comfort with his own size advantage. There was something else there, too. A subtle assumption, a kind of casual certainty that came from working in an industry where Asian actors were usually background color, where real fighting ability mattered less than camera presence. Let's run it once, full speed, no cameras. I want to see how it flows. Bruce settled into his own stance, weight on his back leg, hands raised but relaxed. The crew stepped back, giving them space. Several grips and electricians paused their work, sensing something worth watching. There was a quality to the moment, a gathering tension that anyone who'd spent time on film sets recognized. The difference between rehearsal and something more authentic. Donovan moved first, throwing the scripted combination, a jab, cross, jab. Standard boxing fundamentals that looked good on camera and gave the hero clean lines to counter against. He pulled the punches exactly as taught, stopping them inches from Bruce's face. Bruce slipped the first two strikes, his head moving minimally, just enough. But on the third, punch, something shifted. Instead of following the choreographed block, his hand flickered up, impossibly fast, too fast for something that wasn't supposed to be real, and caught Donovan's wrist mid-extension. Not the gentle stage combat catch. An actual trap. Fingers locked like a mechanical vice controlling the joint, freezing the limb in space. Donovan felt the difference immediately. His wrist simply stopped moving, held in place with pressure that went beyond what was necessary for camera work. He tried to pull back, testing the grip, and found it completely immovable. His forearm muscles strained against resistance that felt like it had been engineered specifically to neutralize force. This is the difference. Bruce's voice was calm, almost gentle, still holding Donovan's wrist suspended in empty air, between doing movements and understanding principles. He released the grip, stepped back, reset to neutral stance. Donovan's confidence flickered. He lowered his hand, rubbed his wrist where Bruce's fingers had pressed into pressure points he didn't know existed. The grip hadn't hurt exactly, but it had been absolute, the kind of control that came from something beyond choreography. That wasn't the planned sequence. Donovan tried to keep his tone light, professional, but something defensive crept into his voice. No, Bruce agreed. The planned sequence works for cameras. But you're moving like you think you know what real fighting looks like. I wanted to show you there's a difference. The set had gone quieter. Crew members were watching now, the normal background noise of production falling away. The assistant director glanced at his clipboard, uncertain whether to intervene. Donovan's jaw tightened. He'd spent years in this industry, earned respect through hard work and legitimate toughness. He'd taken real hits, trained with actual fighters, knew the difference between movie combat and street combat. And here was this actor, talented, sure, famous for his martial arts, but still an actor, suggesting he didn't understand reality. Look, Mr. Lee, I respect what you do, but I've been in actual fights. Street fights back in my wrestling days. I know what real combat feels like. Donovan's voice had an edge now, the polite professional veneer cracking to reveal something more raw underneath. This movie stuff is great, makes you look fantastic on screen, but it's still choreography, it's still performance. The temperature in the warehouse seemed to drop several degrees. Bruce stood very still, his expression unchanging, but everyone close enough could feel the shift, like watching a predator decide whether something was prey or just passing through its territory. You think what I do is performance. Bruce's voice remained steady, no anger, no heat, just clarification seeking precision. I think you're very good at making it look real for cameras. Donovan straightened to his full height, using those extra inches, those extra pounds. But there's a difference between fighting for film and fighting when it actually matters. When someone's really trying to hurt you, when it's not rehearsed. Several crew members exchanged glances. The assistant director took a step forward, mouth opening to diplomatically redirect the conversation. But Bruce raised one hand, a small gesture that somehow commanded complete attention. Show me. Bruce's invitation was quiet, almost casual. Donovan blinked. What? You said you know real fighting, show me. Bruce's stance shifted subtly, weight redistributing, hands lowering to a more natural position. Not choreography, not performance. Show me what you think real combat looks like. The warehouse had gone completely silent now. Camera operators straightened from their equipment. The director, who'd been discussing angles with the cinematographer, turned to watch. Everyone understood they were witnessing something that had moved beyond normal production dynamics into territory that could either be fascinating or catastrophic. Donovan hesitated. This wasn't how film sets worked. You didn't actually fight the star. You protected them, made them look good, followed the carefully planned sequences that kept everyone safe and maintained the production schedule. But there was pride involved now. His own words hanging in the air, the implication that he knew something Bruce Lee, the martial artist who'd become famous specifically for authentic technique, didn't understand. I don't want to hurt you, Mr. Lee. Donovan tried to find a diplomatic exit. This isn't what we're here to do. You won't. Bruce's voice carried absolute certainty, no arrogance, just factual assessment. But I want you to try. Really try. Because you seem to think there's a difference between what I do and what's real. I'm offering you the opportunity to learn there isn't. The air felt charged, electric. This was the moment, the decision point that would reveal character, expose assumption, demonstrate what lived beneath professional courtesy and film industry politeness. Donovan looked around, saw the crew watching, felt the weight of his own statements, the professional reputation he'd built, the masculine pride that came from years of believing his toughness was genuine and earned. All right. He stepped back onto the practice mat, dropping the careful choreography stance and settling into something more authentic. The wrestler's approach, weight forward, hands ready to grab and control. The kind of aggressive grappling base that had served him in actual competition. But don't say I didn't warn you. Bruce simply waited, relaxed, hands at his sides now, weight distributed evenly on both feet. To anyone who understood fighting, his stillness was terrifying. The absolute confidence of someone who knew exactly what was about to happen and had already calculated 17 ways to control it. Donovan moved. He came forward fast, genuinely fast, using his size and wrestling background to close distance, reaching for a collar tie that would let him control Bruce's head and neck, pull him off balance, use superior weight to dominate position. The reach never connected. Bruce's movement was impossible to track. Not because it was quick, though it was, but because it seemed to violate normal physics. One instant he was standing still, the next he disappeared from the space Donovan's hands were grabbing, materialized at a 45-degree angle, and Donovan's momentum was carrying him forward into empty air. Before Donovan could adjust, before his wrestling instincts could process the failed grip, he felt pressure on his extended arm. Not a grab, but a structured redirection. Bruce's hand guiding the overextended limb while simultaneously moving into the space Donovan's aggressive approach had left vulnerable. Then wait, sudden and complete, as Bruce's body positioned behind the compromised arm, leveraging physics and anatomy in ways Donovan's brain couldn't process fast enough to counter. The throw was textbook judo, but executed with a precision that came from something deeper than sport. The kind of technique that worked not because of size or strength, but because it exploited fundamental mechanics of how joints moved, how balance worked, how aggression could become its own defeat. Donovan hit the mat hard, his back impacting canvas with force that drove air from his lungs, his right arm extended and controlled in a position that made the shoulder joint scream with stress. Not injured, Bruce had calibrated the force exactly, but completely immobilized, trapped in a lock that made any resistance impossible without dislocating his own shoulder. The entire sequence had taken perhaps 1.5 seconds. Donovan lay on the canvas, breathing hard, staring up at warehouse ceiling lights, feeling Bruce's weight pinning his arm in a position that revealed just how thoroughly he'd been controlled. No excessive force, no theatrical dramatics, just absolute technical dominance applied so efficiently it felt like magic. This, Bruce's voice came from above, still calm, still gentle, is real fighting, not performance, not choreography, principle. He released the pressure, stood, offered his hand. Donovan took it automatically, letting Bruce help him to his feet, his mind still trying to process what his body had just experienced. The throw had been clean, controlled, but more terrifying than any wild brawl. It had been intelligent violence, combat as problem-solving, force applied with surgical precision. Donovan started, stopped, had no idea what to say. The entire crew was frozen, watching, the silence heavy with shared understanding that they'd witnessed something beyond normal stunt work. This hadn't been rehearsed or staged. It had been authentic demonstration of capability that existed at a completely different level than anything Hollywood usually saw. Bruce looked at Donovan with something that wasn't triumph or anger, but something closer to disappointment. Not in Donovan specifically, but in a larger assumption, the casual dismissal, the surface level understanding that plagued martial arts in Western film, the idea that Asian fighting systems were exotic performance rather than deeply sophisticated sciences of combat. You assumed, Bruce said quietly, just loud enough for Donovan to hear, that because you've been in some fights, because you've got size and wrestling background, you understood real combat. But real fighting isn't about being tough or aggressive. It's about understanding how bodies move, how force transfers, how to read intention and exploit commitment. It's physics and psychology applied through years of refinement. Donovan nodded slowly, still catching his breath, his shoulder aching where the lock had stressed the joint. Around them, the crew remained silent, some looking away now, giving the moment privacy despite its public nature. "I'm sorry, Mr. Lee." The apology came out rough, genuine, stripped of professional polish. "You're right, I thought I knew what I was talking about." Bruce studied him for a moment, reading sincerity, measuring whether this was performance or actual recognition. He saw genuine shock in Donovan's eyes, the specific vulnerability that came from having fundamental assumptions shattered, not through argument but through undeniable physical demonstration. "The difference between us," Bruce said, his voice dropping to conversational volume, meant for Donovan but carrying to the crew who'd gone so quiet that every word was audible, "isn't talent or toughness, it's approach. You learned fighting as a tool, something to use when needed, something to win with. I learned fighting as a language, a philosophy, a way of understanding how reality works." He gestured to the practice mat, the crew, the cameras waiting to capture carefully choreographed sequences. "What we do for films is absolutely performance, but it's performance based on authentic principle. Every movement you see on screen comes from something that actually works, that has been tested in real confrontation, refined through decades of practice. The choreography doesn't make it fake, it makes it visible, repeatable, safe enough to film. But the foundation is real." Donovan listened, rubbing his shoulder, processing not just the words but the entire experience. The speed, the technique, the complete control Bruce had demonstrated without causing actual injury. That was perhaps most impressive, the capability to hurt combined with the discipline not to. "Could you—" Donovan hesitated. "Could you show me, slowly, how you did that?" Something shifted in Bruce's expression, not a smile exactly, but a softening. The disappointment replaced by something more hopeful. This was the response he wanted, the opening toward genuine understanding rather than defensive ego protection. "Yes." Bruce moved back to the center of the mat, beckoned Donovan to join him. "Come here, I'll break down the principle." Over the next 20 minutes, with the crew watching in fascination, production schedule temporarily abandoned, Bruce walked Donovan through the mechanics of what had happened. How the failed grab had created the opening, how positioning relative to center of gravity made the throw possible, how the arm lock controlled weight distribution and joint angle to create absolute immobilization without requiring excessive strength. He demonstrated slowly, letting Donovan feel each stage, understand where the technique worked and why. Not just showing movements, but explaining the philosophy underneath. How Wing Chun trained economy of motion, how Jeet Kune Do emphasized adaptability over fixed technique, how real martial arts was about understanding human biomechanics at a deep, almost intuitive level. Donovan absorbed it all, his initial defensive pride giving way to genuine fascination. He'd spent years learning stage combat, had trained with boxers and wrestlers, but this was something else. A systematic approach that made fighting feel more like advanced engineering than simple aggression. "The thing people misunderstand about martial arts," Bruce explained, positioning Donovan's arm to show proper angle for a wrist lock, "is they think it's about special moves or secret techniques. It's not. It's about understanding principles so deeply that you can apply them spontaneously without thinking, adapting to whatever situation presents itself." He released the lock, stepped back. "You assumed I was just an actor doing performance because that's what Hollywood usually offers. Surface-level imitation of martial arts, movements that look exotic without understanding why they work. But what I'm trying to bring to film is actual martial arts, authentic technique, philosophy expressed through physical action. That's why I insisted on choreographing my own fights, why I won't compromise on realism even when directors want more theatrical spinning kicks. Donovan nodded, understanding now extending beyond just physical technique to something larger. Bruce wasn't just fighting in movies, he was fighting for representation, for the legitimacy of Asian martial arts in Western culture, for the recognition that these systems had depth and sophistication equal to or exceeding Western combat sports. I apologize, Donovan said again, more complete this time, not just for underestimating your skill, but for the assumption behind it. You're right. I saw the movie martial arts and didn't recognize the real thing underneath. Bruce accepted the apology with a slight bow, the formal gesture carrying weight despite its brevity. The assumption is understandable. It's what I'm working to. Change not just for myself, but for everyone who comes after. When audiences see authentic martial arts on screen, when they understand there's real philosophy and real capability behind it, it changes perception. Makes people think differently about Asian culture, about what strength looks like, about who gets to be the hero. He glanced at the crew who'd been watching the entire exchange with rapt attention, then back to Donovan. You have good instincts, solid foundation from your wrestling background. If you're interested, actually interested, I could show you more. Teach you some principles that would make your stunt work better and keep you safer in the long term. Donovan's eyes widened. The offer was unexpected, generous given how the confrontation had started. I… yes, absolutely, I'd be honored. Bruce smiled then, genuine warmth breaking through the serious intensity. Good. Because the best way to change assumptions is to teach people who'll carry the knowledge forward. You work with other stunt coordinators, other actors. If you understand real martial arts, you can help spread that understanding, make the industry better. He turned to the assistant director who'd been watching with clipboard forgotten, schedule abandoned. All right, let's get back to work. We have a film to make. Rick, you know the choreography, let's run it as planned. But now you'll understand why each movement works the way it does. Make your choices from that understanding. The crew stirred back to life, the spell of focused attention breaking as people returned to their equipment, their positions, their specific technical responsibilities. But something had changed in the warehouse atmosphere. A shared understanding that they'd witnessed not just a skilled performer, but a master operating at a level most of them had never seen before. Donovan took his position for the rehearsal, but his entire body language had transformed. The casual confidence replaced by attentive respect, the subtle dismissiveness gone, replaced by genuine eagerness to learn. They ran the choreographed sequence, and this time it flowed differently. Donovan moved with new awareness, understanding the purpose behind each block and counter, making choices that served the story beat while respecting the technical principle. Bruce adjusted and refined, offering corrections that Donovan now recognized as coming from deep expertise rather than actor pickiness. The cameras rolled. The sequence was captured across multiple angles, dozens of takes, the repetitive technical work of filmmaking. But underneath the professional routine, something more significant had occurred. A teaching moment, a bridge built across cultural and professional assumptions, a demonstration that real power often looks quiet and controlled until the moment it becomes necessary. 3 months later, the film released to packed theaters across America and Asia. The fight. Choreography drew praise for its realism, its fluidity, the way it made martial arts look both beautiful and genuinely dangerous. Critics noted Bruce Lee's unique screen presence, the combination of physical capability and philosophical depth that made his characters more than just action heroes. But the real ripple effect happened behind the scenes in Hollywood's stunt community, among the coordinators and doubles who worked on fight sequences across dozens of productions. Rick Donovan told the story, not to diminish himself, but to illustrate what he'd learned. He became an advocate for authentic martial arts training and stunt work, for respecting the depth and sophistication of Asian fighting systems, for understanding that real technique was safer and more effective than theatrical approximation. He trained with Bruce when schedules aligned, absorbing principles, asking questions, and slowly building competency that came from understanding rather than just mimicking movements. And he taught others, younger stunt performers who came up through the industry, actors who wanted to do their own fighting on screen, coordinators planning complex sequences. The lesson traveled: real strength isn't about dominating through size or aggression. It's about understanding principles so deeply that you can apply them with precision and control. Real teaching isn't about humiliating someone for their ignorance. It's about showing them what they don't know and offering a path to genuine understanding. Bruce continued making films, breaking barriers, becoming an icon not just in action cinema, but in cultural representation. He fought for creative control, for authentic portrayal, for the recognition that Asian martial artists were masters of sophisticated systems that deserved respect and serious study. When he died suddenly in 1973, just weeks before his masterpiece, Enter the Dragon, would premiere and make him a global phenomenon, the shock reverberated through the industry and beyond. He was 32 years old at the peak of his physical capability and creative influence, gone before he could fully see the impact he'd created. But the ripple effects continued. The stunt coordinators who'd learned from him directly or indirectly, the actors who insisted on authentic martial arts training, the filmmakers who recognized that Asian characters could be heroes without compromise or stereotype, the audiences worldwide who saw in Bruce's films something beyond entertainment, a philosophy, a dignity, a demonstration that strength came in many forms and cultures. Decades later, in 2024, Rick Donovan gave an interview for a documentary about Hollywood stunt work. He was 73 now, retired, looking back on a career that spanned the industry's transformation from practical effects to digital enhancement. The interviewer asked about memorable moments, dangerous stunts, close calls. Donovan thought for a moment, then told a different story about a day on set in 1973, about the assumption he'd made and the lesson he'd received. "I thought I knew fighting," he said, voice carrying the roughness of age but eyes still sharp with memory. "I'd been in actual brawls, had wrestling credentials, worked in movies for years doing combat scenes. And I dismissed Bruce Lee as just an actor doing performance martial arts. I actually said that to his face." He shook his head, smiling at his younger self's arrogance. "He could have destroyed me. He had every right to. I disrespected him professionally, dismissed his life's work, challenged him in front of his crew. But he didn't. He demonstrated the difference between what I knew and what he knew, made it absolutely clear in about 2 seconds, and then he taught me. Explained the principles, showed me why I'd failed so completely, offered to train me properly." The interviewer leaned forward. "What did you learn?" "That real mastery isn't about winning confrontations. It's about what you do after you've won. Anyone can destroy someone weaker or less skilled. Bruce showed me it takes much more strength to teach them, to build them up, to offer knowledge instead of just proving superiority." Donovan paused, looking directly at the camera. He's been gone 50 years now. But that lesson, that moment on set where he chose to teach instead of humiliate, it shaped my entire career, my approach to training, how I treated younger stunt performers coming up. I've tried to pass forward what he showed me. That skill has responsibility attached. That real strength is demonstrated through restraint and generosity, not domination. The interview continued, moving to other topics, but that story became the segment that circulated most widely when the documentary released. A glimpse into Bruce Lee that went beyond the film icon, revealing the teacher, the philosopher, the person who understood that the highest expression of martial arts wasn't defeating opponents, but transforming them. So here's the question that matters. Who in your life have you dismissed without really understanding what they know? When was the last time you assumed your experience gave you authority to judge someone else's expertise? And more important, when you're proven right, when you win the argument, when someone challenges you and you have the capability to shut them down completely, what do you do with that power? Do you destroy them? Humiliate them publicly? Use your superiority to make them feel small? Or do you do what's actually harder? Do you teach them? Do you show them why they were wrong while offering them the tools to grow past that wrongness? Do you extend grace and knowledge instead of just proving dominance? Bruce Lee was one of the most capable fighters who ever lived. He could have crushed Rick Donovan, made him look foolish, asserted dominance in a way that would have been entirely justified, given the disrespect he'd received. He chose differently. He demonstrated the gap, made it undeniable and educational, and then he closed it, offering to teach, to share knowledge, to build up rather than just tear down. That's the difference between being skilled and being masterful. Skills win confrontations. Mastery transforms them into opportunities for growth, yours and theirs. When you have knowledge, capability, expertise that someone else lacks and disrespects, you face a choice in that moment. The easy path is showing them how wrong they are and walking away satisfied. The harder path, the one that requires actual strength, is showing them how wrong they are and then helping them become less wrong. Every interaction where you're proven right is an opportunity to demonstrate what kind of person you are. Someone who values being right, or someone who values helping others become better. 1 second of physical demonstration changed Rick Donovan's life and career, but it was what happened after that second, the 20 minutes of teaching, the offer of continued training, the generosity of knowledge shared, that created real lasting impact, ripple effects that spread through an industry and influenced hundreds of other professionals over decades. Real power isn't demonstrated through what you can destroy. It's demonstrated through what you choose to build, even with those who underestimate or disrespect you. That's the lesson worth remembering. That's the principle worth carrying forward. And that's the question you need to answer for yourself. When you have the chance to prove someone wrong, what do you do with that moment? Do you win and walk away, or do you win and offer them a path to understanding? Your answer to that question, lived consistently across hundreds of small interactions over years, determines not just your character, but your legacy. What you leave behind in the people you've encountered, the knowledge you've shared, the grace you've extended even when it wasn't required. Bruce Lee understood that. He lived it. And in doing so, he created impact that outlived his 32 years, influenced generations, transformed an industry's understanding of what martial arts could be and who could be a hero. Not through destroying everyone who challenged him, through teaching them,